Second take. Do not rate, comment, or subscribe. Pause the video, read the description, and if it's worth it to you, you can watch the video, but just use the links. I'm basically using the links as well. A 5 foot 6 inch tall lady, that's what's stated on paperwork that I could find. That doesn't mean it's accurate at all. Teresa Halbach worked at Thomas Pierce's Green Bay photo studio in 2005. Halloween of the year, she went on a photo assignment at Manitowoc County's salvage yard, the one that was owned by Steven Avery. And she vanished at one point or another. And a picture of her and her vehicle were circulated because both were missing. By 2005, November 10th, just a few days later, they found her and her charred remains in a fire pit, and her cell phone, and her RAV4, and its car keys and license plate at the home of Steven Avery. Now at this point, you'd be, well, duh, there's only a couple of combinations that can happen. He was completely unaware of a dead body being burned in the backyard, and a vehicle being parked on the property in a way that would make it hard to find, and a set of license plate, car keys, and a cell phone that didn't belong there. Okay. He gave an alibi. His minor nephew, Brendan Dassey, who then confessed everything in the style of a book that he said later on he was quoting, and gave the goods on Steven Avery. By 2007, both had been convicted by Calumet County, Wisconsin District Attorney Kenneth R. Kratz. 2016, Brendan Dassey's conviction was overturned due to coercion, because he was a minor at the time or something, and or his confession plagiarizing a novel, which is where he said he got the information from. He was also listed as impressionable. Both of them had a checkered past, one of them unfounded, that should be stated. The police photo, and also that was used to circulate, another photo for finding her later on as well. Some of the photos, or all photos, showed the RAV4 as blue. This was taken 2 years after it was purchased at Green Bay's Toyota, run by Bob Lemieux, I can't pronounce his name right, who sold it as a green or Mystic Teal RAV4 that was 5 foot 7 inches tall, a little bit taller than her. The photo shows her looking taller than that because it's a perspective effect. Now, we're going to bring up what would cause any of this. Let's say the guy whose property the body was found, burned in a pit on, had nothing to do with it somehow. A, he would have to present some evidence someone else was on the property, or couldn't have any direct evidence. His blood was found connected to this subject. Found on the car, whatever. Now, and also it didn't help that his nephew, that was supposed to be the alibi, ratted him out. Now, coercion alone can get a person relieved of being considered guilty if it's the only basis they have, and if the person listens to the lawyer and never talks again. He recanted, and all he has to do is never talk again, which is what the guy did. That's the nephew, who would have gotten out at 53, while Steve would have been left to rot in prison till the day he died, and still is. Now, he has to show someone else did it, or some evidence of it, a video camera or whatever, or there has to be compelling reasons to believe he didn't do it. I don't know of any motive. I don't care. We're not worried about that. So let's just do the photo really quickly. She worked at a photographer place. She's a photographer. Photographers are almost physiologically incapable of taking a simple photo that doesn't confuse you. They're almost always doing manual controls on cameras, but many cameras will compensate and color balance an image to make it to where the person's face is the dominant color correction source. If it's an overcast day, a bright day, a dark day, it doesn't matter. They'll try to get the face right. Most cameras are biased that way to the point that if you have any color other than what you see on screen now, you're going to have trouble getting a decent photo unless the camera knows what it's doing. And that also qualifies for people using film actual chemical film. Chemical film is biased towards white people. Taking a picture with a light meter or even color correction function pointed at a person's face, it'll fixate on the face and it'll screw up the color of literally everything in the area because it doesn't care. So if you see a photo of just the car that looks blue and her with the car that looks blue, it's probably blue. The trouble is the car is listed as or was supposed to have been sold and also has some photos showing it being green or Mystic Teal, whatever Mystic Teal is. Mystic Teal sounds like a trade name for the paint that was used. So type in Mystic Teal rav4 and look at all the photos looking blue or green or other. Now, light filtering effects from the sky, etc. Green, blue, red, and yellow can be filtered out by various conditions and by the camera automatically. And even if you're an expert photographer, you might leave it that way anyway. Expert photographers, except for being compelled to screw with that stupid zoom function, which screws up the perspective effect, they will very often just leave it auto-correcting for color for human faces. They just make sure it's set to the most simple thing for it. This also might have been a cell phone photo. It might have also been run through an Instagram filter. I don't know. Unless anybody wants to dig up hard facts attested to by the prosecution and the defense as saying it's definitively XYZ, there's no discussion here. We're just going to assume, since a photographer probably took it, and it could have been a high-end or low-end camera or a cell phone, it could be literally anything caused by the camera, number one. Number two, it could have been caused by the light that day. Number three, any photographer will tell you how much of a pain in the ass it is to take a picture of a car that looks consistent from one day to the next based on lighting, unless they literally haven't done any of it. Next, a car can be exposed over, I think it's over 2 years here after it was bought, to ultraviolet light and just change color. Next, most cars have more than one layer of paint put on them. Some of them are transparent, translucent, whatever. And again, that will cause refraction effects inside that will, number one, change the color depending on which angle the light is. And number two, ultraviolet light will cook it to a different color. This happens all the damn time. I really don't know anybody who hasn't experienced this. I had a car this happened to, and it was from the 70s. I've also seen a recent car this happened to. It looked pearl instead of matte white. Another car it was the same one, probably the same paint job, looked the opposite. It went from pearl to, from one to the other way. Now, and I want to point out, do you really believe police have perfect documentation capability? Many police photographers are fantastically well trained, but they will have a camera that's set to emulate human eyes and color values human beings pick up and make sure it matches what they see on that day so that it's right. Meanwhile, the photographer is trying to make you look good because they want you to pay them money. But some police departments will have a camera that does a bunch of autocorrecting. I ducking hate autocorrect. Excuse me, well, you get the idea, right? Okay, now, height difference. That's a forced perspective effect. It can be done with any expensive camera or even a cheap one. They all do a slight distortion to it. Next, her being 5'6" and the car listing as 5'7", it could be the wrong size because the tires could be different. But anyway, it's a forced perspective effect, and all you have to do is set up two mechanically stable wooden pegs or posts that's 5'6". Just make it 5.5 feet tall and be done with it. Put them far enough apart, you get the same perspective effect, and then from taking it with a camera, estimate how far away, get them lined up the way you see in the photo, and count how far apart they are. Then get a camera with a completely different focal length and see if you get the same damn image. You probably will, but maybe you won't. Walk up and backwards and forwards, start from the beginning and seeing if you can get the same distances. Will it come out exactly right? Unless you know the lens f-stop camera type, unless you know every detail about it, this is ridiculously hard to do, but it can be done. And even then, you get UFO people who won't believe that, it's a photo of a model on a table because they want to believe. Now we're going to do the conspiracy theorist part of it. There's a variety of person who will look into anything that gets in the news and look for anything that they can make a comment on. Actually, because they need to. It's a compulsion. Acknowledge it. Don't believe it? You haven't been on the net long enough. And there are people out there who will look into something that happened in, apparently this is accurate, 2005. It's a very long time ago. And dig into a case because it was on Netflix a while ago. Really? Okay. Now, next thing. A reporter reporting about it being on Netflix has received death threats because they think now that they're in on it. There's a cover-up because it had to be the DA, or it had to be somebody else, or, it's gray aliens. And I'm not kidding. Some of them are complaining that this was done by a changeling space creature from the Zeta Prime galaxy subset, blah, blah. I mean, it went on and on. Okay. Other people just think, the photo looks suspicious, therefore it must be fake. Or the camera did it, or the photographer did it by just mucking with the damn lenses, or the car changed color over time, or the perspective effect was simply caused by it being run through a fucking filter. Next. Maybe she sold the car and got another one. Maybe she just had it painted. Maybe they just made a mistake on what it was written up as. The majority of the images look green. Okay. Were they all taken with cell phones and this is the only one taken with a film camera? I don't know either. None of you do. Some of you might say you know. I saw for some reason this is actually showing up a lot. I saw a couple of pages that claimed, well, I know somebody. Yeah, they know somebody in the police department that also says there's gray aliens talking to them in their sleep and blah, blah, blah. Who say, well, it definitely was faked. You have evidence of falsified evidence in the case. Did they turn it in? No. Well, then we're done. Okay, next. Who killed her? I don't know. Is the guy in jail for it guilty? I don't know. That's not what I've been asked to evaluate. I've been asked to evaluate a borderline UFO flat earther, nearly religious zeal-driven set of commentary on the internet, including calling up people at a newspaper and threatening them with death because they didn't say what you wanted to hear. Some people out there. Some people. So, let's review. Her body and car and all her paraphernalia were found on a property where she was burned to death. Or burned after she was dead. On a guy's property, and he's in prison for it. Next. The car that was involved changed color over time, or the photos were screwed up, or it's a giant conspiracy and cover-up because, and then you insert name that complaint. I saw a couple of channels that have an axe to grind against what was it, Manitowoc County, or what was it, Calumet County. They don't like them because they had to take a fence down because it was over a property line or something. There are people with an axe to grind against these counties that are making these videos up to harass the county because it creates plausible deniability when they go off and start stalking people who are in the city council or newspaper reporters. So, from this point forward, have I really reviewed this very well? No. Have any of them? No. Is the photo very likely completely valid? Yes. Unless you reproduce the effect and succeed at it, you can't prove that it can be phonied up. It does not look phony. Next, I don't care if it was a photo taken with a flash or not. That's not an indication of a person being a professional or an amateur. Both will use flash at one time or another. The idea is to bias the image to where you get a good image this way with light coming this way. Maybe there was a shadow on her eyebrows or something. I don't know. The point is, unless you do this for a living and prove it in a YouTube channel where you're not just fixating on this subject, I don't trust your opinion. Now I'll do the last part. Is this an informed opinion by me? In no way, shape, or form is this informed. I don't have all the legal documents in front of me and the data. So here's what has to happen if anyone wants to discuss this with me or have me do it. What camera was used to take the photo you think is faked? What camera was used to take the photos that you think are legitimate? If there's more than one camera, I need a list of all of them, and then I can go look this all up. Okay? No? Then we're done. This happened in 2005. If you don't have that data, you don't have any basis for evaluation. Meanwhile, her charred body was found on someone's property, and he's in prison for it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And just because it's trending doesn't mean people should make videos about it necessarily.